Hockey is a man's game. Yeah, I'll get into why that is not the case in just a minute. But first, welcome to Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. I'm Amanda. Hockey analysis, book obsession. You miss 100% of the pages you don't read. This is the 5th episode, so if you're here, thank you. Hopefully you already listened to the first 4 episodes, but if you missed them, go ahead and pause this episode right now and go back and listen. Otherwise, here at Plot Twists and Hat Tricks, the episodes are broken down into 3 segments or periods. The first period is always hockey analysis. Could be about the NHL, could be about the PWHL. You'll have to tune in to find out. The second period is where I talk about a book. There are never any spoilers for the book being talked about. Finally, we have the third period, which, similar to the game of hockey, anything can happen. So I consider it my wild card. It changes every week. Well, let's lace up those skates and take the ice. The first period is about to start. All right, this week's first period is on the PWHL, or the Professional Women's Hockey League. This league was only started a few years ago in 2023. There are currently 9 teams, and I'm going to list all 9 teams and a player that you may or may not know from that team. I tried to choose big name players that we saw on either Team USA or Team Canada, but let's just dive into it and see what we came up with. So the first team is the Boston Fleet, and the player that I chose to watch there was Megan Keller. She played for Team USA. You might recognize the name. She scored, I believe, the golden goal. Watch out for her. Our next team does not have a name. It is actually one of the 3 expansion teams that are joining the league in the 2026-2027 period, or the 2026-2027 season. And this will be the PWHL Detroit team name, hopefully coming soon, and you better believe I'll be updating you when I hear that. A player to watch on this team is definitely Hillary Knight. She is arguably one of the most recognizable female hockey players right now. A huge name. She is sponsored with Red Bull, which was a huge deal. I remember when that sponsorship came through, and that's absolutely fantastic for her. And then I do want to give a little shout out to Jessie Comfort. She also played for Team USA, but she is actually part of the first duo in league history to be playing in the same city as her brother, who plays for the NHL franchise, the Detroit Red Wings, in JT Comfort. Our next team is another expansion team, the PWHL Hamilton, and the player I'm choosing to highlight for this team is Jade Iginla. She was drafted this year to this expansion team, and I thought that I would put her on our radars because her dad is Jerome Iginla, who is a hockey legend, and her brother was also recently drafted into the NHL. So it'll be fun to watch another Iginla in professional hockey. Our next PWHL team is PWHL Las Vegas. And the person I would like to shout out for this team is Nicole Hensley. So I actually grew up playing hockey, and we'll talk a bit about that in the third period, but I actually had the opportunity to play with Nicole Hensley. She is a couple years older than me, so it was mainly just in practice, but it's great to see someone from that I grew up playing with make it to the Olympics, win a medal, and to see her success now in the PWHL. So she'll be one of the big names opening up the Las Vegas team. Our next team is the Minnesota Frost, and I would like to highlight their goalie, Maddie Rooney, who also played for Team USA. The next team is the Montreal Victory. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong. They actually won the championship this year. And the player I'd like to highlight is Marie-Philip Poulin, who is the captain of Team Canada and has been a thorn in Team USA's side for as long as I can remember. So it's really great to see her playing in the professionals and getting the love and attention that she definitely deserves. Next team is the New York Sirens, and the player that I chose for that was actually one of the top scorers for their team in Sarah Filer. She also played for Team Canada. The New York Sirens and the team that I'm going to mention after this are actually the two teams that, when I looked at their rosters, I did not see a recognizable name, which is fantastic. I'm glad that I can look at rosters and not know the name of every single player, or be able to pick out and be like, oh, I know that name from Team USA, or I know this, or I know that. So it was fun to go and look at the stats and see which player to highlight for each team. So the next team that I have is the Ottawa Charge. And I am probably going to butcher this name. She's from Chesnia. Her name is Tirza Vanisova. I'm so sorry. I looked for a pronunciation on the PWHL website and I could not find it. But she was an Olympian and she was the top goal scorer on the team last year. And her name was also the most challenging to say, so naturally I had to choose the hardest route and choose the hardest player's name to say. So she's definitely one to watch out for. The next team is the PWHL San Jose, which is the final expansion team for this season. And the player that I chose was Layla Edwards, who was on Team USA and just made a splash. She broke a lot of records from the USA standpoint, and it's really cool to see her go from Team USA to now being able to make hockey her professional career. The next team is the Seattle Torrent, and the person I would like to highlight is Alex Carpenter, and she also played for Team USA. If you are seeing a theme here, I did pull most of the Team USA players that I recognized on these rosters, and that's purely because of my familiarity with women's hockey being with the U.S. Women's Olympic team. The next team is The next team is the Toronto Skeep Trees. Again, there's not a pronunciation, and I probably butchered that. I am so sorry. And the player I'm choosing to highlight is actually a recognizable last name as well, and Lauren Messier. Ironically, she is not related to the Mark Messier that we know and love from the New York Rangers, and believe he is an analyst on ESPN, but her dad is still named Mark, spelled differently and unrelated to the NHL legend. And then our last but certainly not least, in the Vancouver Golden Eyes, the player that I would like to highlight is Sarah Nurse. And if that sounds familiar, it is because her brother is Darnell Nurse, who used to play for the Edmonton Oilers, who did request a trade from the team, and I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, is down on the LA Kings, but I could be totally wrong on that. But that is why you recognize the name. She is also a huge name with Team Canada and has been a great advocate for women's hockey. So let's talk about the PWHL season. So similar to the NHL season, it actually starts about a month later. So it starts in November and it runs through the end of April. So then playoffs start right after, very similar to the NHL, and they run through May. They are a lot shorter because they don't have as many rounds because of the less or not having as many teams in the league. So I expect that their playoff season especially is going to get longer as more teams hopefully join the league, and maybe even the regular season gets a little bit longer and it does end up mirroring the NHL. I know as of right now, a lot of the teams are using the NHL arenas as their home arena, so scheduling might become a little bit of a headache, which might mean that the seasons start earlier or later. But as of right now, they are pretty much mirror images of what is going on in the NHL. Another unique thing that the PWHL does is they do something called takeovers, and they announce it at the beginning of the season. And essentially, these are exhibition games in a host city. So, for example, they've come to Denver, I want to say 3 times in the past since the PWHL was erected, and twice in this past season. We as Denver actually thought that we were going to get a PWHL team because the takeovers were so successful for the league. Unfortunately, it looks like we lost out to Vegas, which that's tough. If you listen to episode 2, you might understand why Vegas won again and why there's no love lost between Denver and Vegas right now. But that is pretty much the PWHL. They are the Professional Women's Hockey League. They match the NHL in skill. Growing up, I honestly wish that the PWHL existed because I would be all over that for goals. All right. Well, that is some girl power conquering the PWHL. Those are some real life female main characters that are taking the world by storm. Speaking of female main characters, let's hop right into the second period where we explore the controversial 5th ACOTAR book, A Court of Silver Flames. So, what is A Court of Silver Flames about? Well, the plot is Nesta's healing journey into finding her self-worth. And how did I consume this? Eyeball read, per usual, on my first read, and then on future reads, I usually did a audiobook. So, why should you read this? Personally, I think of all the ACOTAR books, this book is probably the most relatable, regardless of what you've gone through. And I think we can all learn a little bit from Nesta's strength and through her healing journey and how she conquers those demons. I think it also highlights that you really don't know what is going on in somebody's head, and you can perceive one thing and something completely different could be going on. So what are my thoughts on this? So the first time I read A Court of Silver Flames, I remember being tentative because everything we had learned about Nesta was up to this point was through Farah's point of view, which is her youngest sister. And to be honest, Farah got the short end of the stick in sisterhood without a doubt. So she did not have a very positive view of Nesta. And I think that kind of made A Court of Silver Flames that much more powerful because Nesta really kept to herself and we didn't know what was going on with Nesta. We just honestly thought she was a bitch. And I think Sarah J. Maas, or SJM, did a beautiful job in saying, hey, she is like that for a reason. She's coming off like that for a reason. And the reason why this book is so controversial is because of how hated Nesta was, and in some cases still is, in the ACOTAR universe. But to be honest, when I go through and I rank the ACOTAR books on which one is my favorite, this one is usually tied for first. And there's a lot of reasons why. Without going into spoiler territory, this is a really long book. Let's just start with that. It can be very tough to get through. There's also a lot of smut in this book, but still aren't, those aren't the reasons why I like this book. I like this book because I can, and especially when I first read it, I really could relate to Nesta's journey. I don't think that I have really ever related so much to a character. The only exception I can think of is maybe Violet Sorrengail from the Fourth Wing or the Empyrean series. I related to her a lot as well, but Nesta was just on this totally different level. You see her battling through addiction, you see her battling through depression and anxiety and not feeling like you're good enough, and fighting through not feeling like she fits in, and just not knowing where to go in her life, and just seeing her sisters have success. I mean, her sister Farah holds one of the highest seats in the Night Court, and that's her little sister. And that has to be hard. And you hear just the battle that's raging within Nesta, and you getting to see her point of view and how she's just trying to balance everything. It really changes your viewpoint on Nesta in the earlier books. And I think that a lot of people are quick to write Nesta off because she is not a very likable character. When I first read through the series, I did not like Nesta at all. And then as I finished the series, I end up being like, she's the one I identify with the most. And because I identified so much with Nesta through her healing journey, she meets her mate in A Court of Silver Flames, and a lot of the characteristics that she loves about her mate and makes him her mate are actually a lot of the qualities that my current partner have. And I remember sitting and I was talking with my friend when I was first reading through the book and being like, oh, I want my partner to have similar qualities to Rhysand, and like, he's a great book boyfriend. And as I was reading through, without any spoilers of who Nesta's mate ends up being, as I'm reading through her point of view, through what she struggled with, and relating to that, I was like, maybe I want to Rhysand, but I might actually need this other character's traits more. And to be honest, I think that my partner matches his traits very well. So if he ever ends up listening to this episode, maybe you'll finally read A Court of Silver Flames. Yes, my boyfriend is not a big reader and was actually one of the inspirations for creating the second period segment. For those of you who don't know, this segment is not meant to be like a book club or discuss what happens in the book. It is purely to talk about why is this book so popular in the book fandom, and why should you read it. And if you're not a reader, why is maybe your partner reading it, or your friend reading it, your sister, your mom, your, I don't know, your any other family member or any other relationship that you have, why people are reading these books. And it's not, the reason why I'm keeping no spoilers is because I want to encourage you to read the book, and I'm pulling out the main themes and why these books mean so much to the book fandoms that are part of them. And where, yes, I do end up in the third period, typically trying to find a way to tie what's happening in the first period to what's happening in the second period. The main reason for the second period is to see why. Maybe it encourages you to pick up the book, or maybe you just get a new respect for why your partner, your sister, your mother, or whomever in your life is the reader, why they like these books so much and why they mean so much. And really, that's all what this segment's for. All right, so now that we understand the importance of being your own hero, let's talk about how being a woman in sports can have its challenges, and how those who make it really illustrate some FMC energy, or female main character energy. All right, so this week's third period is on the importance of women in professional sports and just women's professional sports in general. So, story time. We are going to get a little vulnerable and talk about my hockey career. So, I went to my first hockey game when I was 3 years old. I went to a Colorado Avalanche versus Los Angeles Kings game. And although I don't exactly remember that game because I was 3, my parents have told me that I was a Jumbotron favorite for dancing and that I just fell in love with the game. I could have told you that without them needing to tell me that. But I wanted to, the game looked fun. And I think I was destined to be a hockey player, or at least a skater at some point, because my mom has photographic evidence of me at age maybe 1.5 of me on skates. And throughout most of my life, I've been told that I can skate better than I can walk, which to this day, even though I don't skate as often, I still think it's true because I trip over my own feet all the time. It is absolutely terrible. But I enjoyed a good career. It was about 15 years. I grew up playing hockey here in Colorado. The organization that I played for actually no longer exists. They're just, women's hockey got really, really popular in Colorado, and then it got a little diluted, and now they have the right amount of teams for the right amount of women that are playing right now. So I believe my former organization was just absorbed, and a lot of the men's teams now also have like a women's side to their team. And so fast forward to when I was 19 and when I got hurt. I was playing men's club hockey, and in a future episode, I'm thinking in a bonus episode, I am going to do a path to the NHL and maybe even a path to the PWHL, and talk about the different ways that you can get into professional sports from a player's standpoint. And so essentially everybody on, all the men on that team, they had played junior hockey. For those of you who don't know, junior hockey is usually what players are playing in before they get drafted into the NHL. There's a couple different routes to joining the NHL. Some players go juniors, then NHL when they turn 18. Some players do juniors, then college, then NHL. There's a lot of different paths to the NHL, but essentially the players that I was playing with, they had all played juniors. They either didn't get drafted for whatever reason, maybe they were too small, it's just really hard to get into the NHL, and they just didn't have the skill set, which is totally fair, and it happens. But they ended up playing men's club hockey, and I was the only girl on the team. And I made the wrong guy mad. Typically in those games, being the only girl and the smallest on the team, I was given a wide berth, and they would do something called body contact. And so there's a difference between body contact and checking. With body contact, you're typically taking the hands away from the player. That is typically seen more on the women's side of hockey, although there is some checking along the boards. In women's hockey, you don't typically see those big open ice checks that are seen in the highlight reels for the NHL. And in men's hockey, that's obviously where you get the checking, and you're taught how to check in Bantams, which is aged late middle school, early high school. Anyway, so like I said, I pissed off the wrong guy, and he took any anger that he had out on me and effectively ended my hockey career. I don't remember the hit. I have been told how I was hit by my teammates, and I remember them telling me, because they had to tell me. I believe they even told my parents, because I kept asking for weeks after the hit because I could not remember it for the life of me. But essentially, he was significantly taller than me. So it was essentially an elbow to my chest. Then he used his elbow to lift me up by my chin. And then he pile drived me down into the ice. And I went headfirst into the ice and then my shoulder. On that hit, I ended up with post-concussion syndrome that ended up going undiagnosed for about 3 years until a neurologist was like, hey, you might have this. And it is a super mild case with it. I've learned how to live with it, but ended up with that. And then on the hit, my shoulder was separated. And then when I hit the ice, my shoulder was put back into place. I ended up with a broken collarbone and 3 shoulder surgeries after that hit. And although I've technically never been cleared from the head side to play hockey again, I've also made a decision from a player standpoint that it is not fair to my team to go out and play. I have tried, but my shoulder is not as stable as I would like it to be. And one bad fall or a bad hit can really mess it up and mess my arm up, and then I'm letting my team down, and I'm not willing to put any of my teammates in jeopardy like that. So that's my playing career. So let's talk about me working in hockey. I was trying to join the NHL in the late 2010s, early 2020s. And it it was a tough journey. I worked with some fantastic teams. I had some fantastic experiences that I will love forever, having some fantastic player interactions, having some great compliments coming from coaches or other people in the industry, having some once in a lifetime experiences. I also had some really, really tough ones. I would say that some of my favorite experiences were getting to talk to coaching staff and tell them where I was seeing holes, or helping getting to see the lineup before it was published, or just kind of little things like that. But the sexism was hard. I dealt with a lot of sexual harassment. I was told that if I wanted to be a hockey analyst, that I was essentially going to have to marry my way in there, by either through a player or through a GM, because otherwise I was never going to make it. And when you're in your early 20s, that's really hard. That's really hard to swallow. And at the time, it was definitely a white men's only club, and it was really hard as a woman to try to break in. However, now in 2026, it's different. I mean, we have the PWHL, we have women coaches, we have women assistant coaches, we have women in the hockey operations, on the hockey operations side, holding amazing titles like assistant GM and director of hockey ops or hockey operations coordinator. We're seeing women in the hockey analyst or in the hockey analyst spots. And even though I didn't make it, I am so incredibly happy for all those who did, and for all of those that stuck with it. And I hope I paved the way a little bit for you guys to make it. But the ultimate reason why I ended up leaving hockey was I worked for a team called the Humboldt Broncos. When I started working with this team, nobody knew where Humboldt was. I spent a lot of my senior year of college educating people of where Humboldt, Saskatchewan was. And I remember telling my best friend that I'm going to move to Canada after I graduate, and it's going to be great. And I was offered a tentative scouting position, but we were waiting until I graduated to make anything official, because with college graduation, I wasn't sure, am I going to stay in Colorado? Am I going to leave? And it was really touch and go. So we were just kind of tabling it. Plus, the Broncos were in playoffs at the time, so we didn't want to make any like future season decisions, but while we were trying to focus on playoffs. If you're a hockey fan, then you're probably familiar with the Humboldt Broncos bus crash on April 6th, 2018. To be clear, I was not on the bus. I was working remote with a team. I was in college at CU Boulder at the time, but I watched essentially my career derail a little bit with that crash. Yeah, I don't talk about the bus crash that often, because I still to this day remember where I was when I got the news. I remember thinking that it was a bad joke. And yeah, I wasn't on the bus, but I knew people who were. And we're going to leave it on that. So, why is professional women's sports so important? Well, it's important to have role models. I know that growing up playing hockey, I idolized the Team USA women, especially one that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is Angela Regario, and then Cami Granado, Julie Shu, some big Team USA names there. And if there was something like the PWHL when I was growing up, I would have gobbled that up. And maybe instead of having all those posters of like Joe Sakic and Patrick Waugh, I would have female hockey players as my idols. And it would give me something to work towards. And not to say that I wouldn't be having posters of Joe Sakic or Patrick Waugh. I just think that it would have given me something else to work towards, because when I was growing up, it was, hey, maybe after you graduate high school, maybe you get to play in college. And if you don't play in college, then you're kind of done. And after college, then you are really done. You can go play beer league, but that's about all the options that you really have at the time. And that's changed a lot. There's definitely some women's leagues now that are competitive that you can play in after college, and things have changed a lot. But in the time where I was in high school, that was not an option. But just women's sports in general is growing. Like, I want to call out Caitlin Clark. She is a WNBA player, and she has really brought more fans to women's sports. And I think that we're at a place in the world where we're ready for that. And it's been great to watch women's sports grow. And I mean, as I mentioned in the first period, there are PWHL games that are selling out NHL stadiums. Like, this is the time for women's sports. And it's so great to see women become professional athletes. It's so much fun to watch women grow in their careers in sports. And they are our real life female main characters. They are our real life Nestas, our real life Farahs, our real life Violet Soaringales. You name a female main character, and a professional women's athlete or a woman working in sports is that female main character, without a doubt. All right, that is it, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to the 5th episode of Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. Since we are a brand new rookie podcast, please rate 5 stars and leave a nice review, as it helps other hockey lovers and book enthusiasts find me. I am active on social media. Find me on TikTok and Instagram at PTHTpod, or email me at pthtpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes. Until then, remember, you miss 100% of the pages you never read and the shots you never take. Bye, guys.